Welcome to the Speed League podcast from Southern California. You can play free fantasy F1, MotoGP, Supercross, and more at speedleaguefantasy.com. Go check it out. We're talking MotoGP 2024 today, and I'm here, as always, with the man, the myth, and the legend, Ryan Berkman. What's up, Ryan?
Yes, sir. How's it going, Kelly?
And today we're also joined by our MotoGP genius and former CVMA racer, Matt Brown. What's up, Matt?
Hey, evening, guys. How are you?
We're good. So super stoked for 2024 MotoGP because, like, obviously last year's MotoGP championship was a total barnstormer that went down to the last race. So we're going to talk about rankings for the fantasy league for 2024, MotoGP, Moto2, and Moto3. Before we actually get into that, I want to just do a little run through of sort of what the game is for anyone who hasn't played it before. This is a season long fantasy league where you're basically going to get in a league with four different people. There's four of you total, and draft your teams, and you play the whole season long. And we do a bunch of different sports. We do, like I said, F1, Supercross, all of this, but MotoGP. Ryan, you've always been a big proponent of this. Is like one of the most fun games to play, if not the most.
With the three classes, I mean, I think that you just have so many options, and if you're maybe lacking in one class, you could make up for it in another. And also draft strategy really comes into play. You could focus on those Moto2 guys if other people are snatching up all the MotoGP guys. So the gameplay and draft, I think, is our best for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. We've been playing this one for a while now, and I mean, just the chaos of MotoGP kind of makes it fun. It's good. It's good for fantasy because you might one team or one race have like a really bad team that is struggling, and oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this whole season, and then the next week you blow everybody out because it completely turns around. So that's kind of part of the fun. All right, I'm gonna share my screen a little bit, and we'll run through some of the pages so you can actually see what a live league looks like. Let me get this going here. Okay, so I'm actually hopping into what our league was from last year. This is our average Jodo GP, and if you see right up there at the top, that league champion, the pole man, Kelly, that is me. I had a bad few years, and actually I lost a few championship matchups before I blew out Ryan. Not blew out, but was underdog and managed to beat Ryan. So, sorry.
Already trying to put himself up there.
No. Yeah, not a blowout. In fact, I expected to lose this one, but this happens a lot of the time. Is the underdog wins the championship?
Yeah, it does. And my team was stacked all season. I actually ended up getting sort of unlucky, but then lucky because I drafted Bastianini, and then he obviously had that big sprint crash and was out for almost the whole season. I mean, halfway through came back, but I ended up picking up Bezzecchi off the waiver wire, who was one of the top guys for the whole season. So I really lucked out. I had Martin Binder and Bezzecchi. I mean, my MotoGP team was pretty much unstoppable, except for the last race of the season in the championship when Kelly squeaked one by. So, I mean, anything could happen if you don't have the best team. I mean, it all comes down to that final race for the top two. So, pretty fun.
Yeah, you were dominating the entire regular season, and it was kind of the rest of us battling it out for second place for a lot of it. I mean, Matt, you were in it until, the week before the championship or something like that?
No, I was kind of battling from behind for most of it. I was the unfortunate sucker that was moving Bezzecchi in and out of my team to fill in that slot number 3 that Mr. Berkman picked up permanently, and definitely bolstered the rest of his season. So no, I definitely felt like I was unlike most seasons fighting from far behind.
Yeah, Matt's has a really good history in our fantasy league. And I mean, our fourth player in our league, who is not here today, but probably will be on if we do a draft podcast, is my fiance, Deb, who this was her second year, and she won her first. So yeah, I mean, even if you're new to fantasy and haven't played anything like this, don't think you can't come in and clean up, because that's exactly what she did before having a little less luck last year.
Humbled all three of us.
Oh, seriously. Yeah, big time. Okay, so talking a little bit about how the game actually works here. So at the beginning of the year, you're going to draft a team. You get all four of the players together. You'll schedule a time and actually get into a live draft lobby. And I mean, this is one of the most fun parts of the game, is everybody, get on a call together, have a drink, and you're just going to go through one at a time. You can either, choose your order yourself or randomize it. And then it's a snake format. So it goes first pick, second pick, third pick, fourth pick. And then that order reverses: fourth pick, third pick, second pick, first pick, and so on. So, I mean, fourth pick, it's two in a row. And first pick, although, they'll be able to pick up Bagnaia or whoever they choose first, has to wait a long time for that next one. And you're drafting, your team is 3 riders from each class. So you got 3 MotoGP riders, 3 from Moto2, and 3 from Moto3, and you can draft them in any order that you want. And we'll talk about scoring a little bit. The MotoGP class is worth the most. Their first place gets 25 points in MotoGP, whereas Moto2 gets 20 and Moto3 gets 18. Our scoring is a little bit different from official MotoGP scoring, just for the sake of our game. And then also MotoGP has sprint races every week now, which is basically half points. So MotoGP riders definitely worth the most, but when you're in the draft, you get down a little bit further. It might be worth to pick up some of the lower class guys when you're opportunistic. So once you've got that draft done and you've got your team set, then every single race, you're going to go head to head with another person in your league. And your teams will play each other. So I'll jump into a matchup page here so we can see. This was actually our championship matchup from last year, but you can see MotoGP, Moto2, and Moto3 teams. You get points based on how they finish. You're also getting bonus points for pole position and beating your teammate. And then one of the really awesome parts about our game is predictions. You want to talk about predictions a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, so predictions are one of those things where like you always control this for the entire season. And like really the like draft is the one time where like you could, have your guys you're going to have, but then you need to stay on top of those predictions because points really add up, especially having 9 different riders to like score those points on. And it always comes down, say that you're a like few points behind going into like MotoGP and like you hit a like dead on prediction, gets you 5 points. That is the difference in winning or losing a certain week. So, I mean, those are super important to get. 5 points you get if you're dead on. And then if you're 1 off, you get 3, 2 off, 2, 3 off, 1. And like, and then really getting dead on is tough. I mean, you don't see probably, I mean, I'd say average. I mean, maybe you get 1 or 2 dead on predictions every week. But yeah, those really, really come into play for who wins every week.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, most of the time, unless it's a total blowout, your, your point scores between you and who you're playing against are going to be reasonably close. And the amount of prediction points you get can definitely decide that matchup, whether you're going to win it or lose it. So we love that part of this game because it makes it really a skill game. It's, you're not only just throwing a bunch of riders on your team and just letting them do the hard work. You have to get in there and actually have some skill too, and, show how much you know about MotoGP. So every week you're going to have this matchup with someone else in your league. Whoever scores more points total wins. We don't do ties. So if you have a tie, whoever has more prediction points will actually be the tiebreaker. So that again makes prediction points really, really valuable. So the standings are based on who has the best win-loss ratio. At the end of the regular season, which for us is before the final race of the season, the 2 players in your league that have the best win-loss ratio are then going to play each other for the championship, and that's winner take all in the championship. So you basically your whole season, you're just trying to get in that top two. We also have tiebreakers for the standings as well. You know, if you come down to that last race before the championship and two people have the same win-loss ratio, tiebreaker goes to who has more points over the season. And in the unlikely event that you're still tied at that point, it's going to go to prediction points there as well. So prediction points again come into play. I'll poke around these pages. You saw the matchup page here. The My Team page is where you can actually just see your team and break it down, set your predictions from this page. And then the roster page is where you can see all the riders, how many points they've scored throughout the season. And these are Speed League points, again, not official championship points, a little bit different. And this is also where you have the opportunity to make changes to your team. Let's say I've got a guy who's, I picked up in the draft who's not doing very well. I can drop him and pick someone else up another rider who's available. And you're going to be doing that a lot. Your hope is that, your top guys, your Bagnaia, your Martin, your Bezzecchi, someone like that is always going to stay on your team. But once you get a little further down, you might have a guy that's slipping and be able to pick somebody else up. So that's ad drops. You can do that at any point outside of, the 24-hour window when an event is actually happening. You can do ad drops, but then we also have substitutions as well. This is it gets a little bit complicated, but this is a really important part of the game. You want to talk about substitutions, Ryan?
Yeah. So like these are what primarily get used every week. I'd say that ad drops don't happen too often. I mean, unless there's, like a big up and comer, or if, someone gets a season ending injury. But like, say that someone, maybe has a sore shoulder from a crash, or someone's just going to miss one race. You could go into the roster and then pick up a substitute, which means that the person on your team that you're subbing out stays on your team, but for that week, you could bring in someone else on the available roster to fill his spot. So this comes into play, like I said, injury, or if, someone on your team isn't really doing too well, or like qualifies kind of shitty, you could bring in someone that qualified better. And this is limited to one substitute per class, so you can only do it one time. And then once the week is over, that substitute rider goes back to the available roster, and the guy that you subbed out goes back into your roster, and then you have him again. So this, pretty much like I said, happens almost every week. Someone's subbing someone in, subbing someone out. So it really comes into play, and it's something that you need to be doing if you want to stay competitive in your league.
Totally.
Especially in your Moto3 class and per track. You see a lot of times in those lower classifications, one rider who's newer might not be that great at a particular track or style. And all of a sudden you see him dropping down in like 21st place, in a Moto3 class. You're like, that's probably not going to help my team too much.
Oh, totally. Yeah. That we see that all the time. And yeah, you're right. Moto3 is, can be, more chaotic than anything. And you'll see some guys with those hot tracks and bogey tracks and that kind of stuff. So, that's basically how this is structured. Figuring out how that works will be super important to making sure you have success. All of this is listed in the league rules, which once you're in your league, you can just scroll down to the bottom right here and just pop open this modal and be able to read through all of this. And there's some additional details. So highly recommend reading through this when you're actually playing your game. But overall, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward, and you'll get the hang of it fast. All right. Have I missed anything? Do we want to talk about rankings?
Yeah, let's move into rankings.
You did miss the fact that, I was going to say, you missed the fact that the homepage has the all-important chat talk shit feature. So make sure you're using that.
It is very important. So and I'll show this as well. So we got the league chat. This is where Yeah, you could see. I don't know if I even want to scroll and show you guys what's going on in our league chat. This might get us
Blur
flagged
it
on
out.
YouTube, but
You get demonetized and
yeah.
all that.
Let's see. That's the league chat. That's very important. And then below it, actually, honestly, very important is the activity log, where you can see anytime anyone in your league picks up, substitutes, makes any changes to their team, it's going to pop up on the activity log. So keep an eye on that. And yeah, you'll see the people that honestly, a lot of the time, the people that are on top in the league are going to have a lot of entries in the activity log because they're actually making moves. So, okay, we got anything else? Want to talk rankings?
Let's do it, bud.
Okay, so all right, I'm going to stop my sharing here, but we will talk about some rankings. Okay, so starting the MotoGP class. These are our basically speed league expert rankings that we've put together, and keep in mind that we are ranking these factoring in for our game and fantasy. Our scoring is a little bit different, but it's going to mostly reflect what we expect, how the season's going to go. And at number one on top, I mean, with no surprise after last season, and particularly how testing's gone this off season, is Pecco Bagnaia. Barely squeaked it out at the end of last year, but I mean, I think he is the most consistent guy and has crazy speed. I mean, is there any question that he should be ranked number one going into 24?
I don't think that there's any question on this one. I mean, really, if like someone has, someone like Bastianini, I mean, okay. I mean, maybe Martin Bezzecchi, but I mean, there is no one I don't think is like gonna even come close to like topping Bagnaia. And if someone has, some hot take for clicks on like who like should be number one, I don't even want to hear it because it's clearly Bagnaia.
And it's not just him. I mean, you have to give credit to the Ducati program that's behind him. That is just a package that has come together, married better than we've seen in a long time.
Oh, totally agreed. And I mean, this is actually a really epic year potentially for Bagnaia, because he's now going on his third championship, and not only that, it's his third Premier Class championship in a row. And I mean, I actually went and did some digging, and the last three people to win three Premier Class championships in a row: Marc Marquez,
Haven't
Valentino
heard of him.
Rossi, and Mick Doohan
I was
was the
gonna say
last one.
either Doing or Agostini. Like, yeah,
Yeah, Agostini's way back. I think there might have been another few before him, but Mick Doohan was in the 90s. So I mean, basically, the guys that can win three championships in a row, that basically happens once in a decade. So
Yeah.
I mean, Bagnaia is looking to sort of declare himself as like the once in a decade MotoGP rider, which is pretty incredible.
And again, same thing that you just mentioned, those two riders. And if you go back to those times, it was the rider and the team. Like, you had the Yamaha with, representing at that time. Like, you have to have such a marry to be consistent over that long of a time. It's
Yeah.
impressive.
And I mean, to talk about the riders that haven't done this, I mean, Jorge Lorenzo never did this. Casey Stoner never did this. I mean, really, really big names were never able to put a three-peat together. So, yeah, I mean, he has the chance to do something really huge this year. But, I mean, it's not going to go uncontested, because I mean, he's on the Ducati, and the Ducati is incredibly strong, but there's 8 guys on the Ducati this year, and a few of them on the same spec, the 24 Ducati, and one of them is our number 2 ranking, is Jorge Martin.
Yeah, and he was on my team last year,
Yeah,
and he was super, super consistent. I mean, like all year. I mean, he's like one of those guys you want to definitely pick up if like you don't have number one pick and get Bagnaia. But I mean, he definitely, in my opinion, is Bagnaia's number one competition. He's like on the Ducati, and like, yeah, for sure, in like my opinion, number 2 all day. What about you, Matt?
So I agree on that. I think the one thing that we have to consider with, I mean, all of the bikes, when you have a 24 spec, we always have that first half of the season woes. There's something about the new spec of the bike that we see almost every season. For some reason, that the 23s are almost more competitive because they've been figured out. And we never know what that's going to look like over the course of a race. So is that going to happen this year with the Ducati and those top riders, to giving them a little bit of a slow start to the beginning of the season and then it picks up? It's always so curious to see how that comes together. But yeah, Martin, do you guys remember? Was last year his first season on the current spec of the bike? Was the year before? Wasn't he on the previous year's spec bike?
I couldn't tell you. I think you're probably right about that. I don't know for
Yeah.
sure.
So that
But
that that to me, Bagnaia has kind of going for him because he's done that each year for a couple of years. This will be Martin's second year, so hopefully he comes up to speed even faster and it provides even more stability over the course of a season.
so I mean, it's a really good point, and I do remember. I think it was a couple years ago when Bastianini was on the Grassini bike, and he had the last year's spec, and Bagnaia obviously on the factory Ducati had the new spec, and they were having big problems at the
Yeah,
beginning of the year. And Bagnaia
yeah.
was actually making some statements about saying, "Hey, I don't like this. I don't like how I'm kind of being treated as a test rider, while these
Mhm.
other guys on the less premier teams are." Really on the tried and tested machinery. But, and you always have to take testing stuff with a huge grain of salt. But everything we've seen from testing this year is that everyone who's riding the 24 Ducati says, this is better. We like it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And I mean, I kind of hope it does come into play, because if it does, there's some very interesting riders on last year's machinery that we can talk about that might make a big impact if that does become a factor. But okay, so going to number 3, we got another Ducati, and again on a different team, but third in the championship from last year, Marco Bezzecchi, second guy in a row who was on Ryan's team last year.
I know, weird how that's working out, huh? And I still didn't win. But yeah, another guy on the Ducati. I mean, super consistent, 6 podiums last year, a few race wins sprinkled in there. I'm really like another year to like grow, and like figure himself out, because like he's still like relatively young. And I think that he's just like moving up the mountain and like gonna hopefully outperform what he did last year. It's hard to outperform a third, but I mean, I think that he's, going to be on the upward trajectory this year.
Does he have anything for Martin and Bagnaia, do we think? I mean, he did occasionally last year.
I think that he will. I mean, again, he's like on a sick bike, sick team, and he's just like growing and like getting better. He like did like really well in the sprints too. He's a good sprint rider. So I mean, I don't see any issue with him not finishing up there again this year.
It's just such a fine line at the top. There's just so many factors that come into play for all of these guys that it's so hard to throw and feel confident about, like, yes, this is going to happen, because you can't. You just literally can't. It could be as simple as an injury. It could be as simple as someone within their paddock that they don't like. I mean, we're hearing all this stuff about Fabio not liking Morbidelli, and like that teammate. Does that factor come into play to ruin something for him? So, but obviously Bezzecchi is a rider that everybody likes. He's one of those guys as a character, that, and a personality that the MotoGP environment is better for. And I'm such a fan of him and as a personality, and excited to see that him have that opportunity to go up and potentially earn a factory ride. Because I think at the end of this year, you're going to look at some decisions based upon this year's performance, and who's going to be sitting in that factory Ducati team over the next couple of years is going to be up to grabs.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, like you said about having, a teammate thing, he's got a new teammate on his team this year, Fabio Di Giannantonio, who we'll talk about a little bit later. He's a little further down the rankings, but, was real hot, had some crazy speed intermittently at the end of last year. He kind of found it, and, we'll see if he can turn that on again this year. And yeah, if Bezzecchi starts getting beat by his teammate, that's another thing. But okay, so let's talk about what's probably a lot of people who are watching this podcast might be tuned in for, is the most hyped rider and change going into 2024. Probably the biggest question mark. Marc Marquez has after how many years, I don't even know how many years, made the move out of Honda onto the Grassini Racing Ducati, racing last year's machinery, which is obviously very proven. What is Marc Marquez going to do in 2024 on this bike?
So speaking of hot takes, there is a world that I could see Marc Marquez winning this championship. I could see him coming out and he's got the bike figured out. He's been doing all of his testing and, like test sprints and everything. So he's 100% dialed in. I could see him winning this championship, but I could also see him getting 10th in the championship. I mean, like there is just so much, so much just like questions that you would have, like, okay, like, is he gonna come and be the like old Marquez, or is he gonna come out and like kind of do what he did last year and the year before and kind of crash, get hurt, and like kind of look old a little bit, to be honest. So I think that fourth is a good spot for him. But like I said, I would not be surprised if he came out and just stuck it to all these guys and said, I'm still the fastest in the world. I'm gonna freaking take it to Bagnaia.
That's what Cal Crutchlow. That's what Cal Crutchlow thinks is going to happen. On an interview with him, he was riding the Honda for a lot of the same years that Mark was, and just said, "Look, we all just watched him do things on this bike that none of us were capable of doing, and he thinks he's going to do the same thing on the Ducati. But for sure, he has to be the rider with the highest ceiling and lowest floor, I would think."
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny for me. I'm so torn about this because I've kind of been singing the same song about it. To be a successful MotoGP rider, you have to have the whole package, and this is going to be the first time in Mark's career in a long time where he doesn't have an entire factory wrapped around him. At Honda, I mean, you hear the complaints about the other Honda riders for the last couple of years. It was all about Marc Marquez and the development of the bike, the way that Marc Marquez rides. And that's not how it works at Ducati. You look at the past riders that have come into that, even the great, Valentino Rossi, they don't care who you are as a personality. The bike is what the bike is, and you have to develop together.
And he's not the factory team anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's even worse than in that context. But the counter argument that I have to that is Marc Marquez humbled himself. He took a big pay cut in order to go move over. He went to a non-factory team, but it was all worthwhile. And obviously, whether that was the conversations with his brother or the different personalities within the Ducati organization, he wants to win. And so that's why I completely agree with you, Ryan, that you're going to have a shark behind you at some point throughout this season, and his name is Marc Marquez coming for you.
Yeah. So I know, you and me talked about this a little bit, before this podcast. And I know you have sort of a difference of opinion. So here's a question to you, Matt. You have fourth pick in the draft. Are you picking up Marc Marquez?
No.
Okay. All right.
Flat no.
So our fifth ranked rider after Marc Marquez is our first non-Ducati here. And I wonder if this is someone who you'd prefer more in a fourth place pick. Brad Binder, again on Ryan's team last year. How did you not win the championship last year, Ryan? What happened?
I've been asking myself that every single day since the final race. But like Binder, he would probably be a few spots lower if he wasn't the sprint champion in my eyes. I mean, he might not be the best full race guy, but in the sprints, whatever it is, he gets after it. And I really like those sprint points every week. I mean, they add a huge boost to your point total.
It's 50%.
Yeah, exactly. So really looking at how a specific rider does in the sprints when you're trying to make a decision really comes into play. And a lot of people just focus on the race, and how they finish, and okay, this guy got a podium here and a podium there, but if he's not a good sprint rider and he's scoring 1 or 2 points in the sprint, I mean that could be the difference in winning or losing a matchup right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think KTM had the advantage if they don't have to worry about the end of the state of the tire at the end of a race because it's a short stint of a sprint race. That bike is deadly, and I mean you even saw not just Binder but what's his face other KTM rider,
Miller.
Jack Miller. Like those two guys were like holy crap, where did this come from? Throughout these sprint races, they were just always in contention within that top seven. So I really like your insights on why Binder would potentially be up there. I still don't think I would personally put him up there. I have a fan that I like to see something, and maybe it's copium on where my fourth, fifth would potentially be, but I definitely understand where you guys put this at as for a spot.
Yeah, Matt's the king of hot takes in MotoGP and out of position draft picks, and sometimes they pan out and sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
But yeah, I love Binder. I definitely would pick him up fourth, fifth, somewhere around here for sure. I think he's awesome. The sprint points are going to be huge. He's a really exciting guy to watch ride too. I mean, he was just hanging it out back in the rear wheel into corners last year. Super fun, exciting guy to watch.
Yep.
Okay, so now all the way back in sixth place on the other factory Ducati, Enea Bastianini. Weird year last year. 15th place in the championship. Started off with an injury. Ryan, you drafted him, ended up dropping him off of your team. What's going to happen this year with Bastianini, because it's an incredibly critical year for him.
So I know testing doesn't mean everything, obviously, because in like past seasons, Maverick Vinales is the king of testing, and it doesn't really pan out. But Bastianini on the factory Ducati finished second in testing. He was our number 2 ranked guy overall last year as well. He has the speed. And I know that, when last year injuries didn't really pan out, but he is fast as hell. And like he's another guy that we have down here in 6 because last year really didn't pan out. We saw Martin and Bezzecchi just hauling ass. Bastianini could finish second in this championship, and I wouldn't even blink about it. I mean, he has the speed, he's fast, but it's like with last year just like lingering on your mind. I mean, it's like, okay, 6. I'm like, who are you going to put him ahead? We like still haven't got to Matt's pick. If he has 4th pick in the draft, it sounds like it's not Marquez, it's not Binder. Matt, is it Bastianini, or are we going one more to Espargo? Come on.
These are the two guys. This is where my heart's set. And I have a maybe just a weird back of the head thought about them. Is I feel like these two guys have to prove something this year. Bastianini, for the sake of he wants to keep his factory seat, and let's be honest, nobody's dropping Bagnaia from the factory seat, so he's gonna have to demonstrate. And I think that he has the maturity, he has the speed, he has the bike to be able to do it. It's just whether him and Espargo are too old and something happens from an injury standpoint that they get banged up and they lose their season, similar to what happened last year. And between the two of them, I give the edge to the Ducati, so I would be picking up Bastianini at that 4th spot.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree too. To see Bastianini in the top 3 at the end of this season wouldn't be that much of a surprise at all. But it is a question mark, because I mean, even when he came back from his injury last year, he had very middling results. But besides his one just breakout win in Sepang, so what was the reason for that? It's just still lingering injury stuff. Is he past it now? Are we going to see a total turnaround? I don't know. It's a question. But yeah, and then after him, Aleix Espargo, who finished 6th, a hell of a lot better than Bastianini last year. Aleix Espargo is on fire. He's getting old, but still looks really good. Looks great in testing too. The Aprilia looks awesome.
Yeah, like this is a guy that I kind of have my sights on in the later draft picks. I mean, he last year he had 2 wins. Obviously he knows how to freaking pin it to win it. The end of the season really didn't pan out how we wanted.
Going to talk about the cat that's in your frame right now.
I mean, I was trying to play it off.
Your draft assistant over there.
Cats are
Brian
great.
needs a podcast with distraction just to demonstrate his skill set. So
Cats are great for the views, Kelly. I don't know if you know that, but a lot of people are going to come for the cat. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we for sure have mostly female viewers too.
hashtag MotoGP cat.
yeah, but Espargo, I mean, like 2 wins last year. He like did in the season, not as you know, awesome as the middle of his season, but I think that again he is getting a little older. But I really want to target Aleix, and I think that he's going to be a good guy to pick. Towards like the second rounds once you maybe get one of your Moto2 guys and it loops back around. I mean, freaking Aleix is an awesome second option in your MotoGP class.
And how did he finish in testing?
Was it
Third.
just today? Is not overall, right?
Third in testing. I mean, the
Yeah.
bike's fast. He's fast. Like,
Yeah.
there's magic there. And I had him on my team last year. One of the guys that, it was so difficult to watch because you couldn't take him out because he's basically your lead rider for my team. But the variance, and he was also, the one that gives you heartbreak for if this is your first time in fantasy, doing MotoGP fantasy. Be prepared for heartbreak because you're going to have crashes. You're going to have a guy cut you off. You're going to have all kinds of things that you're going to be throwing crap at your screen. You're going to be yelling 4-letter words that, shouldn't be heard by the neighbor because it happens. And he was just one of those guys of circumstances all season long of like
He's
somebody doing
dramatic.
the. It feels like he's not dramatic. The drama always involves him, though. Like,
Okay, yeah, but I think it's both because look at him in interviews and I mean his reactions to when things go wrong. Aleix Espargo is a super emotional Spaniard. Like he's a dramatic guy for sure.
there's been some maturity, but yeah, I'll cop to that.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, the Aprilia looks awesome too, and I mean, kind of appears to be the only bike that may be able to bring it to at least some of the Ducatis this year. So high hopes for Aleix Espargo. Let's start moving through some of these because we got to get to Moto2 and Moto3 also. In 8th place, Fabio Di Giannantonio. He's actually bumped up pretty far from where he finished in 12th last year, but he was, I mean, kind of in a place where he was not doing well and losing his seat in MotoGP and didn't know what his prospects were for this year, and then managed to just figure something out at the end of the year, got himself a win, and had some really, really good results, and got signed by the VR46 Ducati team. So high hopes for Fabio this year.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on these speed league rankings. I mean, we look at testing, we look at last year, the year before, trends, and just everything we can to give the best list possible. And like this was where me and Kelly had a little bit of a kind of butting heads moment where like Kelly even had Di Giannantonio higher than 8th. He actually had him above Espargo, but I kind of came in and like put my foot down, thinking, hey, look, he like did have 1 win last year, but Espargo won 2, and there are definitely pros and cons to each of them. But I think that like Di Giannantonio in 8th is where he should be. Getting 12th last year after he was healthy all season. It's not like he like missed a ton of races. So yeah, 8th Di Giannantonio is probably where I'd put him.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with where we have him ranked now, but in my defense, what I basically saw was young rider. A lot of the times you see guys, even that are really fast, coming into MotoGP and struggling to figure it out. But then once they do figure it out, being able to really turn it on to the next level. And I mean, signed to the VR46 team. I mean, obviously the big man up top, Valentino, saw something in him, and he's on a Ducati, an awesome bike going into this next year to mature as a rider. So I do have really high hopes for Digi.
Which is wild because I remember thinking to myself halfway through the season, like he's gone. Halfway through the season last year, I'm like, he just wasn't performing to the standpoint of like what he needed to be. And it was like, there's no way he's going to get it. And then that last half of the season, he did exactly what he needed to pull it down. So
Yeah, he was impressive.
I'm excited to see what he if he can make it because I mean let's be honest the company he's keeping Maverick Vinales Spargo above him good for you man good for you.
Totally. So yeah, I mean let's talk about Vinales, Top Gun. is not quite top in ninth place right now, but I mean, on the factory Aprilia, good bike. He's kind of figured it out. He hasn't got a race win yet, but seventh in the championship last year is pretty good for Maverick.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, like a fall from grace. I mean, like Vinales was, one of those top premier guys, and it just seemed like the past few seasons he's been getting lower and lower and lower on our rankings. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this year on the Aprilia he could come out, and prove, hey, look, I'm like supposed to be here. Maybe rank me higher next year for the 2025 season. But really, I mean, he just hasn't done anything to merit, moving him up.
Vinales, it's one of those guys where, as a Yamaha guy, I was always a fan, and then he basically just lost a lot of the respect that I have for him. I appreciate him for doing what he does and getting out there and racing. I think he's coming to the tail end of his career, in my opinion, and I just one of those guys that I don't know what to do with and how to feel about it, because I have that lingering like psychosis over it. But he's obviously made some improvements, been a great value to the Aprilia team, and I think he's one of those guys that he's gonna be the one that throws mixes into our rankings. Like one week he's just gonna come in third place and be like, everybody's, what the hell? There goes all
Yeah.
my predictions.
He's a hard guy for predictions, and that's a really
Yeah.
important thing here with fantasy. Actually, is sometimes it's better to have a guy that you can count on predicting in sixth place every single week, rather than some guy who might pull off a podium, but then is going to get 15th the next week, and you're basically just losing all your prediction points on.
And that's him to a T.
Yeah. So Vinales in ninth. I mean, still someone that we expect is going to be within draft range here. You have a 4-player league. Everyone's picking up 3 riders, so that's a total of 12 being drafted. So, I mean, to round out our sort of rankings for drafted positions, Alex Marquez in 10th, Franco Morbidelli in 11th, and Fabio Quartararo dropped all the way down to 12th after, we must have had him ranked in the top 3 or 4 last year. So, those are big hitters here too. I mean, Quartararo finished 10th in the championship last year, but the Yamaha does not look great. And Alex Marquez, I mean, in 10th, he finished 9th, but with some really, really fast rides. And I could definitely see him doing even better.
He is one of my big sleepers for this year. I mean, last year he got a sprint win, got a couple podiums. He is for sure someone I could see being a league winner, which, you take him as your last MotoGP guy drafted. People are skipping around and you get him in the 5th round, let's say, and then he ends up performing like a guy drafted in the 2nd round. So, I mean, watch out for him to be a league winner this year. I could see it happening.
I mean, Kelly, my story. I've been singing Alex's song for a number of years. When I watch him ride, I love the way that he rides. And I know there was an interview that happened, I think last week or something like that, that Mark was being humble because they were interviewing him about how things are going. He's like, you guys shouldn't be looking at me, you should be looking at my brother, because my brother's a damn good rider. And I was like, you know what? One, kudos for you for saying that, but it's true. Alex Marquez is a fantastic rider. He's got a great machine underneath his belt. Morbidelli moving over to a Ducati now, so that's going to be very interesting to see if he's got the skill set to be able to ride, a bike that's competitive.
Yeah, he's crazy fast.
Yeah.
A Moto2 champion, was performing really well on the Yamaha at one point before Yamaha kind of fell apart, and he fell apart extra hard around it. But there's definitely some question marks there because he hasn't participated in testing with some injuries. But I can definitely see Morbidelli, bringing some heat and being up at the top of the timesheets here.
And he has that same stipulation that, like, if he doesn't perform, he's one of those guys on the chopping block for a seat. Like, he had his opportunity at Yamaha. He got lucky to, have a ride on the Ducati. But if he doesn't perform, there's plenty of hungry fish coming up from Moto2 that need to have a spot for a ride. So he's gonna have to earn it.
Speaking of
Totally.
Speaking of hungry guys coming up from Moto2, we actually have Pedro Acosta outside of the drafted MotoGP riders. I mean, he's another guy with a high floor, low ceiling. We aren't really sure how he's going to do. I mean, he's been looking like fine in testing. I mean, not doing anything amazing. And like, we just think that the normally
Pretty good.
rookies, yeah, I mean, decent.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
mean the
nothing.
first test especially, he was in the top 10. I mean, the hype is there.
Hype's there, but it's like rookies coming in to like MotoGP. It's like, this is all the big boys. This is the top of the top, cream of the crop. And I mean, like, we'll see how he ends up. And like, he's going to be one of those guys that if he goes undrafted in your league, you need to make sure that you see exactly where he finishes week one and then either pick him up or sub him in or do something to, if the speed is there, drop your last guy, get him on your team. That could be a potential another league winner right there. Once you get down to these guys, I mean, you need to pay like close attention. I mean, we have Jack Miller not like getting drafted either. I mean, just stay on top of like who's doing what and like who's taken, who's available. And after week one, make those ad drops and get those guys on your team that really need to be there.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that someone ends up having Pedro Acosta as a permanent member of their team after we see how this season starts to pan out. So
Pick me. That'll be me. I think he's the guy that you take him. You take a guy that can ride that well a Moto2 bike, and you give him a bike like that. Has the technology of a MotoGP, and you can be a lot more fearless with a GP bike because of the electronics and the technology. And Pedro Acosta has no short of bravado or testicles attached to him because he's going to go out and fight. Doesn't matter who he's going to go, and he's proven
yeah,
that in Moto2 that he didn't give a shit.
yeah, he's the most hyped rider to come to MotoGP since Marc Marquez, I think. So
I can see
it's
that.
going to be very interesting to see him. So the only rookie coming into MotoGP this year. So it's going to be great. Okay, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much it for our drafted positions, sort of our top 12, 13 for MotoGP. A lot of Yamahas and Hondas outside that draft range. Hopefully, some of them can kind of figure it out, but it's looking bad for the Japanese manufacturers. But keep an eye on them. All right, let's jump into Moto2 really quickly. Moto2 for 2024. Our number one rank is Fermin Aldeguer. Aldeguer, how young is he? Is he like 17 or something like that?
No, he's a little older than that now. I think he was young when he came in.
Okay. But I mean, in any case, he figured it out at the end of the year last year. Obviously, wasn't going to win the championship. That went to Pedro Acosta. He ended up third behind Tony Arbolino, but a bunch of wins right at the end of the season and in dominant fashion. He seems like the clear number one for Moto2 over Arbolino and Canet, which is our number 2 and 3.
I mean, really just like riding that like hot hand, and like also what doing well at the end of the season is it just gives you confidence. And like really when you're riding with confidence and you know that you should be there and there's no question and then everyone's on your nuts, like you're that guy, you're the fast guy, that means a lot, and him being like ranked as the number one guy, I think that that's exactly where he should be, like coming off those 4 wins in a row, the last 4 races. I mean, I think that the freaking sky's the limit for this guy. I was really, really impressed with him.
I've been an Aldeguer fan for some time. He's
Yeah, you
18,
have.
turning 19. He's one of those guys I've sang a song to you, for a number of years now. Again, there is just something when you watch, motorcycle racing long enough, there's something about a riding style. There's something about the way that you interact with the bike, and I've just really, really grown to like that about him. I'm really excited to see what we see from the kind of the top 4 that we have, because you've got some really good veterans that are coming in with some nice competition of some younger cats. And 2025 presents some GP opportunities for some of these guys. So there's not just necessarily one seat to potentially vie for. So you're going to hopefully see some more maturity out of the top riders to finish 1, 2, 3, in the championship, so that they have, the eyes of the GP teams looking at them.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, let's move down this really fast. I mean, if you have anything to say about any of these guys, bring it up. But yeah, Arbolino in second, finished second last year behind Acosta, a really, really strong season. Aaron Canet, who rode, really strong, except was very inconsistent. But I mean, if he finished a race, he was going to finish that thing in second. That's one of those guys that's really good for predictions. Jake Dixon, great season in fifth. Samkiat Chantra, I had him on my team. He did excellent, a big step up for him last year. Alonso Lopez, sixth. Celestino Vietti moving to the Red Bull KTM team, arguably the best team in Moto2. He's ranked seventh. Vietti a couple years ago looked like he was going to run away with the championship, and then it all fell apart, after the beginning of the season. But that guy's got some serious speed, and I have pretty high hopes for him this year. Manuel Gonzalez, eighth with a good season last year. Ayagura back in ninth, but started off the season injured last year and ended up, ninth in the championship. But he was almost won the championship the year before that. And, if he can return to that form, is going to have a really excellent year. 10th, Salach. 11th, our American boy, Joe Roberts. Come on, California. Let's make it happen.
Merkin.
And back in 12th, Albert Arenas. Any thoughts you guys have on any of these riders?
Just like one thought that I have, well, a fact that I have on like Tony Arbolino. He was the only Moto2 rider to not crash the entire season. So I'm like, consistency is like one of those things with like fantasy, especially, is like, if you want a like veteran rider who like rides smart, doesn't ride over his head, and will take what the track gives him, Tony Arbolino is your guy to, race a perfect season, 0 crashes. That says a lot about your riding style and just who you are as a rider.
And always consistently within the top echelon too. It's not like, he would accept a 6th place because he couldn't go get the win on a day and get points. And although that wasn't enough for the championship, it was again a show to sign of maturity from him to be able to get that to get that opportunity to fight for it.
Totally. But yeah, there's actually a lot of rookies to the Moto2 class coming up from Moto3 this year as well. Onchu, Masia, Sasaki, and even some guys that were a little further down there, Morera, Artigas, and Aji, all moving up from Moto2. So some potential to see some of those guys, but it's a big step up from Moto3 and Moto2. And we've seen a lot of really high level Moto3 guys come up to Moto2 and not really be able to hack it. So they're big question marks, but wouldn't be too surprised to see some of them end up on somebody's team at some point this season.
I'll throw it out there, the Morera pick on the Italtrans team. It's again, I've been watching him from a rider standpoint. That's my eyeball for it. Can he do something similar to like an Acosta has done in the past for figuring it out within one season?
Yeah, I'll actually make that shout out for Onchu. I had him in Moto3 last year, and Onchu is actually a really big guy. And that's a big disadvantage in Moto3 because there's such low horsepower that, he's got that extra weight and was just having guys blow by him on the straightaways. And that's going to be less of a factor in Moto2. He's on the Red Bull KTM team, again, arguably the best team in Moto2. So if he can figure out in Moto2, that might be a big deal.
Let's move on to some Moto3 guys. There's not too much going on in like Moto3. It's funny because a lot of the like big name guys, moved on to Moto2, so it's kind of like a crapshoot on exactly who's going to be where and who's going to do what. But Moto3 is always
is
anyways.
in Moto3.
It always is, yeah.
Yeah, we never know what's going to happen. David Alonso ranked first. Was the best finisher from last year that's still in the Moto3 championship. He finished third. So he's our number one rank, followed by Daniel Holgado, who, looked like he was going to be champion in Moto3 for a long time last year, and it kind of fell apart and he ended up fifth. But, he's on the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 team. He's really great. Ortola, third. Valle, fourth. Rueda, fifth. I'm just going to run through these. Munoz, Nepa. The only actual one here that we have that's a rookie who's ranked in our top 12 is this guy, Angel Piqueras. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I believe he was Red Bull Rookies Cup champion from last year and a really strong rider and going to the Leopard Racing Team, which is one of the best teams in Moto3. So he's someone to potentially look out for. He's ranked 8th. Then Yamanaka, Rossi, Furusato, and Kelso. But look, any of these guys in Moto3 might make the step up this year. A lot of the top guys from the class left, and there's a lot of opportunity for some young kids to make a name for themselves. So anybody else standing out to you guys in particular?
I mean, nothing's really standing out, but I do just want to stress, I mean, especially in the Moto3, is stay on top of pickups, drops, substitutions, because like that class, like we brought up earlier, is always, all over the place. And like with that like class really wide open, make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's, and make sure you have your best lineup possible in there.
Yeah, and just watch the rankings pages because on our site the rankings will update, and you'll see how many points they've scored throughout the season. And if you see somebody crawling up those standings that is not on anybody's team, snatch them up.
Yeah, I'd say my standout. I loved watching Holgado race last year. He's one of those guys. He had it's a little bit of unfortunate to kind of put him down in 5th. Munoz is a great rider as well. So as always, this is going to be the class that you're going to be watching these races, and you're just going to be like pulling your hair out because it's like you just don't know what to do, and every race is different. A lot of points earned and lost through Moto3 for sure throughout the season.
Definitely. But yeah, that's it for our rankings. The first race is in Qatar on March 10th. Make sure to set up your league, schedule your draft, and do that if you haven't already. But yeah, and get ready to play. It's gonna be a fun one. It's gonna be a chaotic one. Super long season. But yeah, we got anything else, guys? You stoked? Who's gonna win it this year?
I've got to come back,
Debbie.
guys. I feel like I let y'all. No, not. The problem is with Deb. If Deb wins again, we don't live it down. Like she wins
Yeah.
2 out of 3. That's
bad.
news, so
That is bad.
yeah. Although
But
what, I'll be honest with you, Ryan, I do love how much she digs into Kelly. It's one of my favorite things in all the world. So
she like really does. And like she really cares too. It's like she's always in there setting her like predictions and like picking up guys and everything like that. So it's cool to see like Kelly kind of sweating it with his fiance next to him watching the race. That's always fun to have some in-house competition.
Yeah, whenever we're playing each other in our house, it's not a lot of love in the house on that day. It's all business.
a week of separation.
That's well. Fortunately, I ended up on top last year for me, but yeah, a lot of a silent treatment from the fiance.
But I heard that Debbie likes to be
Good
on
stuff.
top.
Yeah, I was gonna go there too. That's what she said. But
all right, we better wrap this thing up, you bastards.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure to follow us on social media if you haven't already, because we'll post updates about obviously what's going on in MotoGP, but also stuff with the site. If there's any stat corrections or anything like that, that'll affect your matchups. You want to be on top of all of that. So follow us, Speed League Fantasy, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want to find it. And yeah, play for free at speedleaguefantasy.com. Come on, guys. It's a free game to play. This is so much fun. I promise you should do it. So that's it. We'll see you after the first race. Peace out.
Good luck.
Night, everybody.